This is the Interstice podcast. I'm davetrippin. Thanks for showing up, whether that's on iTunes, Spotify, here on the channel. It's available all these different places. Really appreciate you being here. Special thanks to all my patrons for supporting this, making it possible. That's awesome. You guys are amazing. And always want to let people know at the beginning of the podcast that if you want to get your questions answered, you can always write to me at davetrippinon@gmail.com. I've got some great emails. We're going to hit those up in the second half of the podcast, and we'll dive right into it. So I was writing down some ideas that were interesting to me recently, and particularly so because it was an example of something being true or something being the state of things, but for polar opposite reasons, which is so contradictory at its core that you wouldn't think it would be able to arise, but it has, in my opinion. So what I mean to say, what I'm going to talk about, is this idea that kids have, our perception of kids and the sort of things that they're dealing with, and whether that we think they should have time to grow up and there should be this period of maturation, or that kids should be adults very quickly, is something that has totally changed through time. And yet we take for granted whatever the current state of our civilization is at that time. We make the mistake of thinking that that's the way that it always has been. So to give that more context, you would think back in the, say, Middle Ages, not so long ago, even by human standards, that it was the case then that you had kids having to grow up necessarily because of the times very, very quickly. And so people lived less, didn't live for so long during that time. That was one of the contributing elements. There was no technology. This is the biggest thing that I would say that created a sort of grace period that life could be so stable that you could be a kid for longer and you didn't have to deal with the realities and responsibilities of being an adult, which we entered into kind of post this, pre-technological, much as there was technological, but not the sort of boom that we experience nowadays. So it had this sort of relevant impact on your life where you better grow up, you better be an adult, because if you're going to farm and you've spent too much time being a kid, then you're not going to understand all the farming practices required to keep your crops alive. And so you better be basically adult in farming knowledge by the time it is that you're 15. Otherwise, the repercussions of this are going to be that your whole family dies and is wiped out if you can't handle an early frost or something like that. I don't know. Whatever it was that farmers were dealing with, that kind of thing. And then you had all other examples. So that's sort of professionally kids had to become adults very, very quickly. But emotionally, they were becoming adults much more quickly because if your farm was going to survive, then you needed kids to work the farm with you because hiring workers was far too expensive. So people were married out of a necessity, and probably because they were just going to die so damn soon. And so marriage was something that you would have on the table much, much more quickly. And I'm sure at that time, there was no thought about, kids just need to be kids because born of necessity, kids needed to be adults. And so their whole impression of a kid wasn't actually a kid. When they were 15, they were an adult, given the circumstances of the time. So it's also that our idea of what a child is has evolved. And it shows that is something far more amorphous than we take for granted in each state of our civilization as it develops. Because if you ask somebody, how old is a kid, say now, compared to 50, compared to 100, compared to 200 years ago, you would notice a shift in each time period when you asked, what is a kid? Now, maybe indisputably, it would always remain that a child was a child when they were, something like 5 years old. Maybe that remains same. There is sort of a cutoff point, but these sort of early teenage period years where nowadays people would say, very much, that's a child. That, a minor is defined by the law, right? As something I think it's less than 18 years old and you're considered a minor and you're a dependent or whatever for tax purposes, where you better believe you are not a minor not too long ago when you were 18 years old. You were out making your fortune, booted out of the house, whatever it may be. It's a totally different thing. So in that case, it's a lack of technology creating a necessity that you physically and mentally mature much more quickly. And then in more recent years, I was struck, say, for example, in the period that I was growing up, you might say even the 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s, something like this. You could argue that there was this sort of grace period where what was thought to be a child totally extended much, much further. And that was because we had the luxury of kids being in safer environments and societal infrastructures at a level where kids could remain, or people could remain kids for much, much longer. So you got people like, I don't know about myself necessarily. I think because that'll follow to the sort of third part of this discussion, which is the sort of impact that freedom of information has had. But let's focus instead on this interim period I'm discussing now, where basically because of this mid-period of technology, you had kids in a state of a sort of return to Eden, where everything was regulated and the expectation of what a child was totally changed to extend much, much further. Their responsibilities were diminished in some sense. They were given other ones, but not similar responsibilities to an adult. And there developed this idea that, well, kids just shouldn't have to deal with these things because they're still children. But I'm arguing, or I'm observing at least, I would say that that's only because of the situation that was present at that time that allowed people to think about people in this way. So when this gets really spicy, when this gets really interesting, is currently. So I would say that because of freedom of information, because of the development of social media and its towering presence in everything now, because people used to think that social media was, you would name, like, the big ones would obviously be Facebook. Facebook then became Facebook and Twitter, then Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But as we've seen, the way in which these social applications, these social programs, they called them programs before they called them apps. You know that? I noticed the distinct time on phones when they were like, it's an app. And I was like, well, they used to call them programs. That was a weird thing for me. Anyways, it's as that sort of developed and integrated itself into our society and a freedom of information that is now where we had this interim safe period because of technology. This is what's fascinating. Kids are undergoing sort of the same sort of experiences or the same requirement that they grow up much more quickly as we did a long, long time ago. And why I kind of rooted this at the beginning as saying it was a polar opposite, yet the same thing, was that when in the medieval time you had to grow up because there was too little technology and you just had to deal with that shit, and life was really, really tough. But nowadays you have to grow up super, super fast because there is an abundance of technology. And that blows my mind. That's a really, really crazy thing. But also the sort of stamp of each period is to think that the way that children are is given that period of time. Now, what I would say is an added challenge is that usually you would have the elders, the parents of that particular generation, having experienced a sort of stability and equilibrium through their growth that was extended at least one generation for their children. Whereas as technological progress has advanced, then we're running into periods where adults are just as much with their jaw on the floor to the amount of change that's occurring and have had no experience with it, just as much as the children who are having to develop through it. So that kind of exacerbates the problem, right? Because usually at least you'd seen it before and then you would help your children navigate it. But if you and your children have never seen this before, you still have a massive advantage of social maturity. So that's huge, the fact that you're an emotionally mature adult, but the fact that you have that added challenge that you've never experienced this before. So children will always be learning, but now it's not just the children learning, it's you learning. And I don't necessarily think that the interim period where it was all like sunshine and rainbows and kids were given this massive period of time of maturation was all necessarily sunshine and rainbows. I think that's why you saw something of the counterculture movement in the 60s, was because that was stifling. What we discovered when we reached this sort of absolute stability is that we suffocated the up and coming generation with propriety and the way that they should behave, because the adults had seen it all before and they had such careful regulation, and you got this massive pushback. And I think the most difficult thing that for parents to see in that period of time was like, why? You don't know what like struggle is, but these parents don't know how stifling it is to be so overly regulated. So it's a fascinating thing as one then leads to the other. And I really think that, or I would speculate that this is going to be something that's in a sort of, it's in a cycle. So what I'm thinking is that what we're in now, and I'm so fond of saying if we don't blow the world up, that what this is a sign of how the system is growing, as it always has, our like social systems, our social development, where now we're really getting struck. It's weird because it's like paradoxical entropy, where the reason that things are falling apart is that we're making so much progress. Isn't that a wild concept? That because we've been so technologically successful, we've created more opportunities for entropy socially, which is wild. But that's like anybody. What is it? The expression, the fool precedes the master. I think like socially, we're kind of in this fool stage. Not all parents. I bet a lot of parents are doing a great job with sort of like common sense. You might go as far as to say something like intuitive wisdom, understanding how they can navigate this with their children, even if it's new to them as well. There is a sort of like underlying wisdom, I think, that always exists at any time, that if you can tap into it, helps you navigate these kind of things. But the upheaval that we're experiencing is because we are so foreign to this level of rapid change. But I think anything you can grow used to, you can become inured to, you can gain experience with. And I think something that we're developing in experience right now is our ability to handle rapid change. And where that's something that I would say is deeply a part of my generation, but it will only increase, where I think that's perhaps why like my generation's a little bit more okay with it, because we're like, whenever those like awesome, advertisements from the 90s of the internet coming out, as a freedom of information, it allowed for this explosion of change, because that freedom of ideas, the freedom of exchange of ideas, the freedom of education at that point, we kind of sort of saw both worlds. There are many people who would argue that they saw both worlds, but I was still at like the tail end of the beginning of that while I was a child. I would say it's very specific. The generation I'm speaking of for myself is like, if you were basically a child when the internet came into existence, this is a generation from then forward, provided you were a child, that was going to see like just crazy, crazy change. But now you put that in perspective for kids who are born now after like the solid, let's say, past the high speed development of freedom of information. I don't want to make too many assumptions on just how rapid change could become, but these kids definitely, I think, have another level, because I experienced change and it was like kind of ramping up, because I remember at first, like my dad, if he was going to get a movie, we'd download it overnight. And then high-speed internet was released, and I remember how incredibly exciting that was. And that meant that we could download a movie in a couple hours, and then faster meant that we could download it in 20 minutes, and so on and so forth, to the point that we're at now. But then you have kids now who have like, that's all they've known is that rapid level of change. And I would say, if they don't go crazy, that they'll be better equipped for just how much, it's just the way it is, right? And just in the same way where they won't, I think at some point there will be a new expression that supersedes that, what would you say, it's not graduates, but basically takes the place of, I'm at a loss for words, takes the place of social media, because social media is what we call these first platforms that were of themselves, but where when I've talked about this idea that social media has become so utterly integrated, so ubiquitous with everything, that it sort of becomes redundant to call it that. Because like, do you call like using the say applications that are responsible for like image sharing for like this specific like Sony camera, do you call that social media too? Like, I guess it'll become so ubiquitous that you wouldn't even mention it. It becomes a part of your culture. Like, we don't talk about water service, but I bet water service was a big deal when everybody got it, right? It'll become, I mean, like, you already get talks about where internet, and I think it's rapidly moving towards this, so funny that it isn't already there, but it's like a utility. It's weird to think that we don't consider, it's not quite treated in the same way, even if we're moving in that direction. There is a little bit of a divide between thinking of electricity in your house and internet, but it is absolutely that. There is no person 10 years from now who would dream of having a house without internet. It wouldn't exist. You'll always have outliers and contrarians and people who won't always do it. But for, say, like 99 out of 100 people, of course. And it's not only just going to be that it's here in the home, it's that everything is integrated with it. Like every single device that you own would be integrated, whether it's your watch that would be connected to it, your phone, your camera, who knows what other sort of devices. I mean, usually they sort of coalesce, they come together. It's not like you actually get a lot of different ones. But that's something that is rife for change. And so I wonder what the next period of human existence will be like, and if we'll find again, will it repeat this sort of, will it be a period where then people are stifled by the predictability of life, by feeling like they have to go down one kind of path? Or will it have evolved to the point where not only do we have stability, but we also have a freedom of expression, which would allow people to kind of pursue things that not only did they feel safe, but they were allowed to express themselves fully and completely and safely, that they felt fulfilled. And I think that's what it's moving towards, because you're basically trying to accomplish these with each thing that we've developed so far, but with inexperience in some element that has caused the imbalance. So like, we've never been able to have such safe stability as like the 1950s, but we'd never known what it was like to over-regulate our children, and so we went way too far in that direction. And now we've never been used to this massive explosion of technology, and we go way too far in that direction, and we don't know how to manage it or the rate of change that we have, but then we correct that. And then I dream of, you don't want to say utopia, because I think utopia literally means like no place. That's the thing hidden in the word there, the meaning of it, the etymology. Be careful of using words like that. But I do hope that things could be better. That's my final thought, I guess you might say. And there's so many things to suggest that. I would say that it will never be easy, and there's a long, long, long way to go, obviously. And I know there's probably at least several people who are like, do you not know the state of the world right now? And I am keenly aware. I have maybe more than the average person. I'm impacted by this state of things, and kind of the sadness of it, and how dire everything is. But I think it does us no service to respectfully like acknowledging that and dealing with that head on. It's really, really important, equally as much, that we think not with idealism, but with an optimism, and to not ignore what it is that is good, that we are doing well. So that was my thought. I thought it was so cool. I'm like, okay, kids grow up too fast. In one case, no technology. Kids grow up too fast. In this case, too much technology. Well, isn't that just the craziest thing in the world? The other thing that I thought, and it's been kind of fun, and I've dealt with this fairly well, but I made note of it. That's why I would bring it up today, that I was so struck by its significance, where when you make anything, right, you start to appreciate the effort that went into it. So, give an example. If you did a painting and you were trained, if you were well versed in that particular medium, that style, say it's charcoal or watercolor or something, you looking at that piece of art compared to the layman can appreciate so much more in it, because you say, oh, they're using this brush stroke technique and they're using these particular colors, and you in fact see more than the average person who's not trained in whatever subject that is. But I think by extension, when you really start to work hard on like projects and things that take an incredible period of time to accomplish, that something that you get tuned into beyond even technique is time spent building something. And I was so struck recently how it's been tough for me to consume any piece of media, whether that's like a song or a movie. And I actually, come to think of it, this extends even beyond media. It's been like difficult going out my door and not being overwhelmed by human effort and accomplishment. And I guess what sort of also struck me as interesting when I talk about this is that it was not only that I was struck by it, but that we could be so absolutely apathetic to it. I understand why. It's because you get the sort of thing that I'm struggling with that is not helpful, which is a kind of like work empathy fatigue, where you're like, man, I am overwhelmed by like the amount of productivity produced by the human species. Like, it's too much. Everybody just take a break, stop for a moment, stop building all these incredible structures and planning, like whatever it is. Like, it's really, when you get lost in the number of man hours that are produced, and man and lady hours in the course of a day worldwide, it is crazy. It is absolutely nothing less than miraculous. The amount of effort, productivity, and creativity that goes into things. And I found it like when I don't know was I in a city recently, or was it just kind of like downtown where I am now? But I was even looking at all the buildings. And it is true. It is as true now as it was 50 years and 100 years ago, and it will only become more true. But it's this kind of moment where if you become aware of this, like everyday life becomes remarkable, because you take in, like, this has been hundreds of years, and that building took however long and has so many different things that allow it to operate. And then you think about the ways that it keeps operating and the upkeep that's done on it. And it is not, it's miraculous, like I say. And I've had to take a little bit of a step back, because where I think it fatigues me is when I look at media. It's weird, because you'd think that like jealousy would be a deterrent, would be disruptive, but I don't get so much deterred by jealousy when I look at things. Although I'm conscientious of that green-eyed monster, it'll get you. It's when I look at the effort that something went into that, I'm like, oh, geez, like, can I make that much effort? Yes, I can. But it's still, it's really, really, really humbling, and something that I've been taking stock of more and more and more. And you can just look around you, right? Like, how long did this microphone like take to develop? I mean, this is probably manufactured en masse, but then what is the size of the manufacturing place that built it? Like, all these things, all these crazy things. There's this phone that I'm using now. Like, how many people had to work on the design of this phone? And remember, this isn't a single phone. This is an iteration of a phone. That, like, the number of years that arrived at this to occur. And perhaps when you're not being burnt out by it, it is actually a really, really important thing, because we are shown so much productivity, so many incredible things, moment to moment, day to day, that we become numb to something which we should not. And that's how absolutely incredible it is. It's easy to get this absolute spaceship in your hands, and then within a week be like, yeah, but there's a new one. And that's batshit crazy. Like, that should, in no way should that ever be the state of our lives. We should appreciate the absolute wildness of these kind of inventions. But at the same time, like I say, I'm struggling with not get burnt out creatively, feeling like you can't do that, or it'll be too much for you to do. Don't let it get to you in that respect. This has been a good start. And so now I've cracked open the emails, and perhaps I'll wax poetic a little bit more on general life stuff, but we'll get into those, and let's see what people have been writing me with. All right, who is first? We got this pulled up here. So let's jump in to David S. Remember, if you write in, as I say, I really appreciate it if you say where you're from. Sometimes it comes up, but I'm always really, really curious. Like we did the live stream the other day. It was so crazy to me. It will never cease to be amazing, all the different places that people are tuning in from. Right out of the gates, he says, okay, I'm a 26-year-old male from Australia. Past few years, I've dreamt of moving to Japan. I traveled to Japan 5 times now, and I've seen and experienced enough to convince myself I would thoroughly enjoy living there. I'm 6 months away from finishing my degree, which at some point in the future I'm hoping will help me land a teaching position. The problem is, I currently have it pretty good where I live. Ah, I see. I lived here for my whole life, and I have a steady job that earns me, we won't say the amount, I don't even know what this would be in Australian dollars, 100K AUD a year. That seems good to me. and 100K, yeah. And my friends and family all live here. I'm also luckily not in a committed relationship. Yeah, fair enough. I think there can be luck in that, depending on the relationship, right? Or having anything else here that would tie me down. That might be a bit cliche, but I feel like I'm stuck in a loop, and time is ticking faster than ever before. I don't want to be stuck here forever, and while the nest I built might be comfy, I feel like if I don't get out, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. So my question is, in bold, what would you do in my situation? I would love to hear your thoughts, and hopefully you can relate to this in some way. Well, I don't know if I can relate in terms of financial stability, but I can relate, like I think we can all relate to the experience of feeling like, are we pursuing something that truly makes us feel fulfilled? What I would say is this, I'm not going to like immediately jump on what you'd think the assumption would be, like follow your dreams, come to Japan, blah, 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 blah. Like that's what you'd assume, right? That's what my channel's here for, tell people to come to Japan, but it should be more nuanced than that. So what I advocate for is the Japan thing, is that the thing? Basically, I would say, like, if it is truly the thing, then sure, yeah, that's really cool. But I mean, you talk about, like you say, the minutes are ticking by here. You don't want to be stuck there forever. Is that the thing that's going to bring you fulfillment? So you also have the benefit developed as well that you probably have a few dollars in the bank. You're 26. I don't know how many years you've been doing what you're doing, but you probably now have also accumulated some experience with it. It is probably not the easiest thing in the world to get a job that pays that amount, but with experience, it's that intangible thing. You can't get hired with experience, but how do you get experience? Without experience, but how do you get it? Then I think you could probably enter into it again. I mean, I know all my friends who are like, these mechanical engineers that once you have experience in your field, that is a luxury afforded you, that provided you've not been away on too much of a sabbatical or whatever you want to call it, that if you want to return to the fold, you are permitted to do so. So at the very least, I would say, like, if you're going to do it financially responsibly. Maybe that means, oh, okay, I didn't have quite the money in the bank saved up yet that I would like totally recover from this if it's not what I find in my interest. So be patient. If that means taking one more year in the job, you would probably have one of the most satisfying years you'd ever have in that position, because you're anticipating this thing that you're going to do. And not only do you get to anticipate that you are yet still going to do it, you've made up your mind, you're going to do it in the right way, that when you arrive, you've put away, you've squirreled away all your nuts. Your nuts are safe and sound, packed away, and you're ready to come over here perfectly set up. And then beyond that, well, I think probably actually the thing about this decision to take it a little bit out of the clouds is that there's nothing saying that you couldn't come for a year. And like I said, you could probably return to this job or some job like it, given that you have experience, that you couldn't then do afterwards, where you come here and who's to say, I don't know, I don't think I saw exactly what it is that you're doing, but perhaps with a little bit of searching around here, maybe you find that you love Japan and you would actually be able to do that job here. Who knows? So I think the thing with this is to take a little bit of pressure off. I think that's the most important thing, is that nothing needs to be dived into immediately. You can do it responsibly. You should. One thing I will say is that you absolutely, if this is a feeling that you have, is that you're on a road that you don't feel true fulfillment from, that should be addressed, because you will look back, you will regret. So you definitely want to do something about it, but you can do it in such a way that I think only alleviates the stress that you're feeling and doesn't have to add to it in any sort of significant way. So those are my thoughts for you, sir. All right. So next one we got coming up here. Hi, Dave. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for the brilliant content. Oh, you are kind, sir. You've been putting out. Seize the opportunity amidst the crazy time we have found ourselves in. It's a pleasure to watch. I feel your content, in particular, the podcast has evolved, taken on a philosophic tone. Perhaps that's just how I am. This makes the channel cool. Keep up the work. Thanks very much. That's all very kind. My question relates to my current situation. I am from England. However, the last 5 years I've been living in Thailand. Very cool. As an English teacher in a Japanese school. Oh, trippy. I teach numerous classes, around 8 to 10 children per class. Very cool. Smaller classes are great. And I have truly become infatuated by the Japanese culture and language. Thai is too difficult. Yeah, tonal languages, right? I mean, not to say that you couldn't learn anything that you set your mind to, but tonal is a whole other thing that's very, very challenging. In light of this, I've decided to make the move to Japan, which I will do in the next year, presumably April. More power to you. In your opinion, do you think it's worth applying for private schools, bearing in mind I will be applying from Thailand, as opposed to being an ALT in one of the dispatch companies? Whilst I'm making that sacrifice, I would much rather have the trust, creative freedom, and responsibility that comes with working in a private school as I am now. This is one where I think it's tough to get accepted to Japanese private schools without being present. Because, and this isn't to totally discourage you, but there are some cultural norms. Like, it would be, to my mind, very, very, very unusual that you would be hired at a private school where you did not, at least for some time, sit down with the principal of the school. Like, that's a little bit weird. Like, they, given their cultural, understanding of things, that is sort of a very, very important formality that would need to occur. Now, that said, I mean, that's given my experience, right? And maybe my experience is, it's got some years under its belt, but it's not to broad strokes say that it doesn't exist. So it's like I would say to anyone in this situation where I can't definitively say the absolute answer. It's that, come prove me wrong. I would say try to apply and see if you can make that happen for yourself. On the other hand, I also wouldn't shoot yourself in the foot and say that it absolutely has to be a private school. Maybe it could be an international school. Again, people will, I know I will finally have talked enough about it because people will be sick of either asking or hearing me say it. But everything can be this first step when you arrive, right? Like when you come, maybe you wanted to get into a private school. Who cares if you have to start at an international school, which can be awesome? Who cares if you have to start at a public school? In the circumstances that you may be barred from that, I'm not sure what your degree, or if you have a degree, because you need that to get into the public sector. I don't know your exact situation, but usually I would say, like, find a way. Find a way, and that doesn't necessarily have to be to reach the thing that you had at first set out for. You can probably reach it. It might just take one extra step. And I almost think that when people don't follow through, when they see that initial roadblock set up and they're not willing to take the slight detour to reach what it was that they were interested in the first place, then you really didn't want it. because, I mean, that's life. It's navigating these detours where if we only did things that on first attempt or first planning we were given access to, there's almost nothing like that. I mean, you are living the most privileged life, no bitterness there at all, that if you set out to do something and you at first succeed, well then, I mean, that's, yeah, I was saying miraculous in the first half of that, first half of this. I would say it's nearly miraculous. So those are my thoughts. Prove me wrong, although my impression is that that almost never happens. But then don't be discouraged. Try and find an alternative route through to get what it is that you want. All right, cool. So this next one is up from Mr. Grimsley. Great name. I would like to start saying I found your videos a real comfort in this time of isolation in Australia. We got back-to-back Australia. This is cool. In March 2018, my girlfriend and I went over to Japan and I fell in love with it. It's where I want to live and work, and I totally understand what you mean about the rural areas being hidden gems. They are. There's a lot of them. My girlfriend and I had since broken up. It was a really tough time. I hear you. That can be tough. In every relationship that is good, I'll insert that into his statement here. You start to make plans together and things to aim for, and now that that person is gone, I'm sort of at a loss. We can be. Totally natural. Don't feel bad about that. But get back up. I still love Japan, and my goal is to be a filmmaker, editor, and director in Japan. Well, that's an awesome ambition. Good on you. I need to learn the language. I'm trying, but I'm not consistent enough. You and I both. I only have an advanced diploma, not a bachelor's degree. Do I go to university in Melbourne and learn a language, or do I focus on my filmmaking? I'm not sure how to get over there. I'm not sure where to start. I'm 24 years old. You got lots of time. And I'll be 25 in June. Maybe happy birthday, because it's June now. When was this written? This was May. You can tell I haven't gotten to these soon enough. I'm in need of some guidance. What would you say? So kind of commenting, hey, you said here that you would get me a beer if you make it over. I will hold you to that, Grimsley, Mr. Grimsley. So just as I told our friend from the previous email, I think it's about like burning a path through, and I don't mean kind of like blindly blundering forward, but there are ways in which you can get in and you can start to pursue that thing. I think that while people can do a great job of learning the language abroad, I think there is massive benefits to the ability to practice here if you're really intent on it, obviously. So you could go to University of Melbourne and learn it there, but I think you'd be far better off learning it here. You are limited in the degree you have in terms of finding an entry-level position here, but you are not without options entirely. And there are these companies here in Japan that will hire people even without having a full degree. So they're usually like, I'm so fond of saying this, I bet I might be infamous at Peppy Kids Club now, where they're like, why did you apply? And it was, Dave said it was a foot in the door. There are certain eikaiwas that you could get over here with. So first I would scour the boards of these kind of eikaiwas to get in here. And then once you are here, it's kind of circulating in the right circles that would allow you to become a filmmaker and editor. And then if you want to be integrated into the Japanese society of these kind of things, then you would absolutely need to get the language up to the point of fluency, where you can, you know, at a business level discuss whatever it is that you're going to do as you work on different projects. Very, very important to do that. So never too late to start the language. You were right. Like, you do need to get consistent. The things I'd recommend for that are, there's like a couple of applications like consistency apps, and I find that those can be really, really, really helpful. There is as well this concept, people have heard it before, but there's little studying tricks that are incredibly useful. And this one is, I don't have a name for this, nothing fancy, but it's basically like, it's this. If you're going to having trouble consistently studying, then you lower the bar. And by that I mean, you only tell yourself of like, all I got to do today is study for 2 minutes. And what this has the effect of doing is, first of all, well, you are basically consistent because you at least studied that much. But we basically have an initial resistance to anything that it is we're going to do. Me, for example, getting ready for this podcast, I was like, man, I'm tired. It's been a long day. I have all this inertia built up that for the last couple of weeks I burnt out, and then I didn't make anything. And then I was like, okay, don't even think about the podcast. Don't think about what you're going to say. Get up there and like set the room up. You need to get it basically set up, because then now that I've set it up, this is going to be way faster every single time that I do it. Just set the room up. Okay, you set the room up, set the camera up. And as soon as you enter into it and you're kind of lost in the moment now, you'll find a lot less resistance to it. So that's my thoughts on study. Try to study for 2 minutes and you'll find yourself studying for a half hour, and it'll build consistency. I think the language is going to be really important. Aside from that, you're going to need to find a way into the country, because I don't think you're going to get hired outside of it without the language ability up, unless you're here. And so you're going to need to get one of these, like, yeah, say it like it is, right? One of these low-level teaching positions that gets you a work visa and gets you immersed in the culture, learning the language. Thanks very much for your email there, Mr. Grimsley. That was, it's interesting. Like, we got our trials and tribulations, right? We really do. This is just a wicked name. Another wicked name. This is coming from Lex. All right. Okay, I've all right. He says, do not read my name in a video. That's so funny. But I've said his nickname. I didn't say his name. Here's a note for people: if you're gonna tell me not to say your name, put that at the top of the email. Don't put it at the very bottom. Okay. Hi, I've been watching your channel for years now, and I love it. I'm not going to lie. You broke my heart when I saw that you shaved your beard. Well, all things change. You've forgiven me, though. That's good. Okay. My story is a bit strange, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to use it in your videos or not. I've been with my girlfriend for about 12 years. At least I'm not really sure at this point. Long time, though. That's what he's saying. I was recently thinking it's time to pop that question, so to speak. I wanted to propose to her in Japan because we both love the country and been wanting to visit for a long time. It was very romantic. There's lots of ways to do that here. So the plan for us was to go in October for her birthday and for me to propose at the top of Shibuya Scramble. That's a cool spot. Why not? Sure. I've seen this place in one of your videos and thought it would be cool. Check that video out, everybody. It was great. It's the most effort I've made in recent memory. I should picture her of this place on Instagram. Oh, maybe shared a picture of this place on Instagram, and she said that she doesn't want to go because she's afraid of heights. Good that you caught that beforehand. The audacity that this woman has. Okay, the actual questions. If you have some ideas or locations that are picturesque and you think would be a good place for a marriage proposal, please let me know. Okay, that's interesting. She shouldn't watch this podcast. I will travel to any part of Japan if it's worth it. What do you think are my choices of getting offers from ALT companies? I have a bachelor's degree and an MBA. Okay, well, then you're totally set. Management experience for more than 7 years, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, so basically with that educational level, you'd have no problem getting in. This is a cool, different question. I like this. I like this when it's not always work related. So what would be, if I were to propose to someone, where would it be? At the hub, definitely at the hub. No, it would be, let's see, places that I love to visit. I think if you wanted a picturesque background, I would suggest Nikko. Nikko is a stunningly beautiful place. And depending on what time of year you go there, it is not necessarily packed with people. I think places that you go which kind of have natural splendor and not so many people around, because what could be more intimate and personal than proposing to spend the rest of your life with someone? That's for me, though. A lot of people propose more publicly and that's their thing. So what's another picturesque place? Well, one of these other places that's incredibly beautiful would be Inokashira Park in Kichijoji in Tokyo. I think that's really, really beautiful spot. There's going to be kind of a theme here of green spaces. in which you could propose. So I'd say Nikko is a beautiful place to go. Definitely Kichijoji Inokashira Park is another great place to go. What else for it? This is a really interesting question. The other places that I've gone are like fun, like snowboarding trips and stuff. So I don't know if you want to integrate a snowboarding trip into your proposal, but that would be kind of cool. Maybe as you're going down the mountain together, you're skiing beside her and wouldn't that be cool? Yeah, those would be my two spots. I think a great way here, actually, you could take my fantasy that I have not yet fulfilled, and you could put this into your experience together. You would get a place. So Nikko I talked about, right? You go to Nikko, you get the private nature onsen experience. So you could go when it's like beautiful in spring, or you could go at winter. So you have like snow falling on bamboo, or snow falling on cedars, whatever that movie was. And you're there, you're in the private onsen together, this beautiful room surrounded by nature, in absolute equilibrium with the environment, and you ask her to marry you. Maybe that's what I would do if I were to ever ask a woman to marry me. Maybe it would be in that environment. Those are my thoughts. If you can't answer, I understand. Oh no, I can answer. Keep doing what you're doing. Loving the videos. Right on, Lex. That's, I've stayed away from the name. I think I've done well with that. And I'd say we probably got room for one more. All right, this is from Nathan. I'm really enjoying the podcast. I would listen doing my homework. Right on, however it happens. I've noticed that you seem to enjoy Japan. I do. And then you talk about how living in another country can really uplift you. I'm somewhat of a person who can really talk to people because over the years I've become who can't. I'm socially awkward, who can't make friends, and I'm in college, I'm studying linguistics. Fascinating that a person who's studying language would not feel comfortable using it. I feel like this path will help develop myself personally, my interpersonal skills, and, interpersonal interaction. Before I was defaulting to nursing for the money, but my heart wasn't in it, and I've been thinking about working in Japan to make a living and meet new faces. However, I heard people say that you are just escaping your current life to go teach in Japan, so that I can forget about my problems. I like to think about it in that. I like to not think about it in that way, and I crave self-development and social connection. I'm about to turn 23 in a week. Okay, so not still quite young. A fine year, 23 is. But the pressure of society is making gravity feel 10 times heavier. Am I really to chase a pointless dream? So, I think there's something ironic in people saying to a person who is socially incapable or fears social interaction that they're just running from their problems to go to possibly one of the most difficult places to socially interact in the world. Like that you're going to like not even a familiar culture, you're going to one like completely alien to your own. How much more could you be trying to get out of your comfort zone? Running from your problems would be going to a place where you would be absolutely safe to continue the way in which you are. Whereas when you live in another country, you are forcing yourself into new experiences. I would say, I've made a video actually talking about escapism and how like we should evaluate, are we just running from our problems to come here? And there's nothing wrong with a little bit of healthy escapism, but we should really evaluate what it is. There are some things that I think that would be a mistake. For example, if you think you're going to run away from your country and it's because you don't like the people there and you're sick of all these mean people and you're going to come to Japan, you're going to get a rude awakening because rude people are everywhere. Some people are just dicks, and that's going to be the same as it is in Japan as elsewhere. But this is not equatable with each other. You saying that you want to get out of your skin, get out of your comfort zone, and come over here, that is you challenging that part of yourself. It's not you expecting that there'll be no challenge over here, or if there is, then are you in for a surprise? No, so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You're especially equipping yourself if you're doing linguistics. It would put you out of your comfort zone. You still have time. And I would say, though, that if you are looking to get yourself out of your comfort zone, my thought for you would be to do this, that sure, you're going to come over here, and I don't see that as running from a problem. I see it's running into a problem where you're going to confront it and slay the dragon. But you shouldn't, with social awkwardness, there's no time like the present. And I will say that it is true of every problem that we have, that the longer that we put it off, the more egregious, the more terrifying the correction, the more energy it takes to correct ourselves away from that thing that we continuously put off. So I do think, however, that you should not wait to Japan to deal with this part of yourself that you struggle with. And you don't need to do it in some grandiose way. I'm not saying that now you commit yourself to going to every single party that you're ever invited to, that you have to talk to 50 people a day. But there are simple ways for you to get more interaction when you're at home. And that'll make it a lot easier, given that you're going to give yourself this mega challenge were you to come over and live in Japan, and kind of attenuate, like make yourself more used to that challenge before you arrive. Because I think there is an issue with people where they're like, I'm going to fix this problem, but then it causes burnout. And the example might be, you've never gone to the gym, but then you think that the solution to that is, I'm going to go 6 days a week. Well, you have no muscles, you have no recovery, you have no eating habits. You now actually have a worse experience, because as opposed to incrementally increasing your load, you go from 0 to 100, and it's too much to bear, and you snap and you break under the pressure, and then you just swear it off forever. Whereas if you start this before you come, then you'll actually be like, all right, I've rolled around, I've tumbled, I can take this kind of this heat, this pressure that I now have living in a foreign country where I need to get out there and be more social, and because of the new work and job that I have and everything like that. So thank you very much for your email, Nathan. That was cool to read. Thank you for contributing to the podcast. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. That wraps us up for this particular edition. I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for tuning in. As I said at the beginning, don't hesitate to write me at davetrippinon@gmail.com to get your questions answered here. Thank you to my patrons, and please do consider supporting me there if you are not and you're enjoying the content on the channel. I really appreciate that. There's links down below in this video. The clock has run out. That's all for now.